Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our session today, Understanding Universal Design for Learning. Before we begin, I wanted to cover some housekeeping items. Please leave your cameras and microphones muted throughout the session. We were able to mute some of your microphones, but if you could, please make sure you mute your microphone. Also, as a reminder, this session is being recorded and transcripts are available to you if requested. If you have any questions, please use the chat feature. We will get to as many of them as possible when we end the session. It is now my pleasure to introduce our presenter, John Bowman. He has been teaching in the North Carolina Community College system for over a decade and says that he's enjoyed every single minute of his time in a classroom. He attended UNC Charlotte for his master's degree in English with a concentration in applied linguistics. Though his original passion was philosophy, the study of language caught and held his attention since he came to see how our world is carved from the words we use. Thus, his dual appreciation for linguistics and philosophy has shaped his pedagogy in important ways. And without further ado, here is John Bowman. Take it away.
Good morning. How is everyone? I know she said to leave your microphones muted, but I tend to be a fairly interactive type of person, and I would love to hear feedback as we move along. So I'm going to keep asking questions, and I hope to hear some answers. You can answer directly. You can unmute yourself and do it that way, or you can use the chat feature. I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my slides because I want to make sure that we can stay on track as much as possible. It's listed as a universal design, but really what I'm going to be discussing today is that subtitle that was attached to the presentation, which is Understanding Englishes of All Sorts. Now, this is a presentation that I've done before for the community college that I work at. I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself, so let me go ahead and jump forward to that. I want to just give you, again, a little bit more of a sense of my background and what I bring to this overall conversation. I hope to give you a sense of what you're going to gain from this today. I do work at Stanley Community College. I'm the head of the English department here and the head of university transfer as well. That's a fairly recent addition. I know I've seen a couple of friendly faces already inside the room. I've received a couple of hellos, so I know that that's you guys, that you're here as well. I do have a background in applied linguistics, and I tell my students all the time that this means that I approach and understand language in a very different way than the average English instructor. For example, the average English instructor would say something like, "Ain't is not a word," and I would say, no, it definitely is a word. It has a place in the English language, but there are historical reasons why it's not used. So that gives you maybe kind of a sense of again, how I tend to approach this subject. I would call myself an advocate for language and language change. That's what I think that brief thing a second ago demonstrates. I will also say that sometimes in advocating for language, people tend to get a little bit heated about that. People are surprisingly protective of their language. And I hope, at least by the end of this, to perhaps challenge some of that. And by the way, I even want to back up because I had to skip that to get to this. You'll notice before I start my slides, this is always kind of fun to point out, it thinks that English is like trying to find a way to talk about multiple Englishes is incorrect. So we tend to think of English as one thing, and I want to challenge that as a part of the presentation I'm going to do today. All right, so here was the overall proposal that I made. I just thought it might be a good idea to share that. I'm not going to stand here and read it at you or anything like that, but I do want to just sort of reiterate that, again, language forms our identity, it forms our sense of place, it forms who we are, it's how we interact with the world, it's how we give shape to our thoughts and how we go about talking to other people. That is the core thing, again, that I want to be able to tackle today. And I hope that that's the carry away that you have from this particular presentation. Now, this is immediately one of those things where I said that I like to call on the audience, and again, you can put this in the chat. I think I can kind of juggle all these things at the same time. I've been doing Zoom for a while now. I had a little experience over the last year. Does anybody know what these mean? Have you ever experienced these before? These phrases or these words? Again, you can put it in the chat or you can just unmute yourself. Everybody's heard of Irish crack. Everybody's had an Australian shout at them, "Go for your life." Nobody? Yeah, not. Okay, thank you. You haven't heard of any of them. Even the last one, by the way. I threw the last one in because I thought surely somebody has heard of the song. If I haver, well, I know I'm going to be, so forth and so on. Pretenders? No? Okay. Okay, not familiar with any of them. You've heard of chuffed before? Do you have any idea what that means? None. Oh, wow. Okay, so I'm batting 100. So, all right, I like to try to introduce people to new words and concepts. So, yeah, I do appreciate that you guys are saying that in the chat. So let me, you've heard the word chuffed, but you're not sure what it means. Okay, yes. Great. That means I can at least teach you a couple of things. These are the general definitions of the phrases that I've shared here. Go for your life is actually a fairly recent addition for me. I'm a member on social media of linguistics groups. And one of the Australians in the group was like, "Oh yeah, we say go for your life all the time," as in like, yeah, go for it. And he said every time I say that to an American, they look at me funny and then they kind of run away because they think that that's a threat. It's not actually a threat. It's like, hey, do you want me to throw another hamburger on the grill? Go for your life. And so that's again what that means. Crack is good fun. That means that you're having a good time with your friends. As a person who visited Ireland, I can say that they definitely say this. And that Americans do look askance at them because we have a very different definition of that pronunciation. So those are the other two. Again, if you've ever heard that song, I think it was from the 90s, "If I Ever Haver," that's top nonsense. So now the next time you hear that song, you know exactly what the guy is talking about. These are sort of interesting and fun, and they're great ways to be able to appreciate, again, the variety of English. I also wanted to start in a more lighthearted way. If you've never seen this before, and actually I just realized, hang on 1 second. Made a little mistake there a second ago. Let me make sure that I share sound. And there we go. Okay, coming back up. Now you should be able to hear this when it plays. If you can't hear it, let me know.
We're good to go.
Oh.
Oh God! I don't know what I'm doing! I can't fly this plane!
I'll go see if the pilot's unconscious!
Kale, try to get someone on the radio? Hello? Hello? Mayday! Mayday!
Hello!
Yes, hello!
Yes, this is Glasgow Air Traffic Control. Are you?
Oh, no, it keeps stopping. Oh, I think it's because I. All right, I'll jump ahead. Okay, all right. So we don't have time to watch the entire thing, unfortunately, because I have a lot of other things I want to share. But that's a nice start because it gives us a sense again of the plurality of English. English is not just one thing. It was really nice, by the way, to be able to see this particular actor, which for whatever reason now his name has escaped me, James McAvoy. There we go. So James McAvoy be able to actually dip into his native accent. This is his legitimate native accent. It's what he uses when he goes home and talks to his friends and family. But that gives you, again, a good sense of the variety of Englishes across the entire world. So one of the things I want to talk about as a linguist as well, really what I'm doing is setting out some groundwork here, because I want to be able to direct us to a very specific conversation by the end. I want to be able to talk about something like, what is a dialect? What is a language? How are those things different? And it's not always as easy as it seems. I've just given this as a quick example of writing. Writing is not just one thing. It's not an alphabet. It's not a series of pictorial presentations. This is Kuku. I think I'm saying that correctly. I might be saying it wrong, which was a type of writing that was embodied in South America. In South America, what they would do is basically tie knots into ropes. And then depending on where that knot was, this was a word. So this was the way in which they would communicate with other people across great distances. That gives you also, again, a sense of how very different language can be for a variety of individuals across and groups across the entire world as well. Okay, here's linguistics then in a nutshell. And sometimes, people struggle a little bit with this, but language does change constantly. Again, that's why I call myself a language advocate, because one of the things that I task myself with as a linguist is I like to try to show people that change is perfectly natural. It's nothing to be afraid of. If we didn't have change, We wouldn't have old, middle, and all the other versions of English as well. So we would not have, for example, we wouldn't be reading Beowulf, and then we wouldn't be reading something like James Joyce. We would all be reading the exact same thing. So as we see, OMG, LOL, all of these different words emerge today. That's part of the natural change that occurs in language. Change is normal. That's what I've been saying to this point. It is normal. It's just part of the process. Spoken language tends to be the language, as I tell my English 111 students all the time, when I just challenge them. I always ask, who was born? And you came out and had a pen in your hand, and you said, well, that was great. I think I'd like to sign. I feel like I need to sign my birth certificate. Nobody does that. You're born, you don't really exactly have language. You're, by the way, learning language before you're ever born. And then you start to learn language. And then after that, you start to layer writing over top of that. So naturally, our brains are programmed to be able to learn language, which is why spoken language is the language. And then everything else is layered over top of that. Correctness, the idea of correctness itself rests upon usage, rests upon conventions. Conventions change, ideas change. One of the most recent ones that I personally applauded was the use of singular they. I know that that makes other people grind their teeth. No, this is supposed to be plural. We need he or she. But I think that that's a wonderful change because it fills a particular gap in the English language that we needed to be able to engage with. All usage is relative. The idea of correctness might change between speech communities, between particular dialects, between nations, and so forth and so on. So, as a quick example, if you've ever looked up the rules involving quotation marks and titles and where commas go in relation to titles, that can vary between nationalities as one, again, quick example. Okay, so let's again talk about some of those definitions. I'm just setting out some groundwork here because we're going to look at some other examples in a second. A dialect is this sort of almost word salad right here that is taken from, again, this particular location, but it is a regionally or socially distinctive variety that is identified by a particular set of words and grammatical structures. So when we looked at that video just a second ago of James McAvoy flying the airplane, that particular accent, the inflection of his words, the way in which he was approaching the subject matter, those are all part of that particular dialect. I would say that one quick marker here is that a dialect tends to be understood between different language groups. We could vaguely understand what he was saying, so we're kind of teetering on the edge there, but that's what the definition of a dialect would be. Again, there is often a blend between a variety of these, between different groups begin to influence each other. We'll see that as we move forward through the slides. I like to share this as well, and it's just because as a native North Carolinian, I have found over the years, when I came through the college program, when I did my applied linguistics degree, we talked a great deal about languages across North Carolina. I share that into my classrooms as well. But this is a particular dialect that I think a good number of people are not aware of. And these are indeed native North Carolinians. So I'm going to let this play out just for a second, but listen to their accent and the way in which they talk. Again, these are card-carrying North Carolinians down the. Give you a sense of, again, the Ocracokers themselves. Okay, yeah, excellent. And I have somebody here in the comment section that it's not made up. It almost sounds made up. I'm sorry, I didn't realize that that was a direct message. So I did have a direct message there. And to, again, it sounds made up. It sounds like something that's just invented. It sounds like they're emphasizing it or overemphasizing it. They're absolutely not doing any of those things. These are people who, in fact, they're in sort of what we would call linguistic danger of their particular dialect disappearing. And it's because they feel kind of a pressure. You heard the one man who was on the boat, for example, he's going under the bridge. He's got that very distinct accent, and then he almost tends to dampen it down because he realizes that that makes him a bit of an outsider. So he's presenting in this particular way. He's got his identity tied into that. Let me jump forward. By the way, the man that was talking is Walt Wolfram. He has done what is the North Carolina Language and Life Project. And that is a collection of particular dialects across all of the entire state of North Carolina. This is a video series that they put out. In fact, you can find it, by the way, if you're at Stanley Community College, you can find it in the library. I did request it. If you're not, again, that's NCLLP, and I would request that be added to your library. It's a great video. It deals with this language group and many other language groups. But inside of this video, these are some of the things that Walt Wolfram has stated. So dialects don't follow rules. They're just broken English, quotes on that. Our dialect is something sacred to us, and I would be willing to wager that that's something that all of us feel. We all have our particular dialect. We have the way in which we grew up. We have the way in which we interact with the entire world. And that dialect gives us purpose and meaning and a sense of identity as well. And so again, I also like to draw attention to this. This is something that he raises kind of throughout the entire video series, but it's also something that I like to make sure that I share with my students. There is no relationship between dialect and intelligence whatsoever. Intelligence is a complete other factor. In fact, if you're as old as I am, you probably remember a great number of people who came from the World War II generation and the Korean War, who had very distinct dialects, who did not have a higher education, but were extraordinarily intelligent people. So again, dialect is not tied to intelligence. And that's one of the things that we sometimes tend to do. We tend to evaluate somebody as in, like I'm listening to you, and you're speaking in this particular way, and you don't sound very intelligent. But I'm going to deal with that as we move forward as well. All right, that brings me to language. This is, again, a dialect that has transformed so much that it has taken on an independent nature of its own. Romance languages are a really great example of this. French, Italian, Portuguese, Romanian, so forth and so on. These are particular dialects of Latin that took on their own life. That's where they all came from. That's why they're so similar. I had a former instructor at UNC Charlotte who knew Spanish, and he decided to learn Portuguese. That was pretty easy for him, he said, because he just got on a plane and went to Portugal, and he just used his Spanish and then made the necessary adjustments in his head. That's fairly complicated as well. Actually, let me back up and finish this point first. That's fairly complicated as well, because then you get into issues of national boundaries and things of that sort. For example, in China, they call Mandarin all the exact same thing, even though the particular dialects cannot necessarily be mutually understood by other people who also speak Mandarin. The written form is the exact same across all of these, but sounds like somebody was unmuted there, but the written form is the same across all of these, but again, the particular dialect can oftentimes be unintelligible between them. Quick example just of how the variety of languages and how languages manifest. Latin, this over here on the right, let's see, the girl loves the dog. I believe that's what that says. I always get a little bit confused with this. My Latin's not so great, but you can put the words in any order you want because it's the markers that tell the function of the word. Also, we have Vietnamese here on the left. You can see that these are the exact same words, exact same. It's the intonation that gives it meaning, though. We have a little bit of that in English, but that's a great, that's a big deal in a lot of Asian-based languages. And the reason I'm sharing this is because as instructors, as people who interact with students and want to help move them forward, it can oftentimes be difficult for us to understand or appreciate the difficulties that they face as they progress through our classes. For example, if you are a native Vietnamese speaker and you're used to using different intonations, then that's going to be very difficult for you to adapt to English, where intonations are sometimes just used for purposes of inflection. Like, are you coming by? Or are you coming by? Those are two very different things. Okay, and I see, yeah, I see you guys are talking about those Eastern North Carolinians in the chat, so I'm gonna let that go. And I'll take any questions I can at the end. Again, to come back to the Romance languages, these are just languages that changed over time. There were particular dialects, and they come to influence a variety of different things. If you've ever wondered why English is so very complicated, it's because basically it was German that came to the UK, and then it was heavily influenced in 1066 going forward by the Romance languages themselves, which is why we end up with messy stuff like plural ox being oxen, that's a Germanic form, and everything else being pluralized with an S. Again, I don't want to get too much into the history of that, but that gives you at least an overview of, again, how complicated language is.
Okay. I'm participating in a.
Oh, okay. All right. I kind of dug around online, and in order to be able to find this, let me see if I could have some stuff here on the screen. There we go. Okay, this gives you kind of a sense again of how very similar the Romance languages are. If you just kind of read down the list here, you can see that there are some odd ones that stand out, but it gives you, again, that it shows you directly that many of these words overlap and that the underlying syntax is more or less the exact same. I don't want to spend too much time on this. I can make sure that I share my slides with you. If you're interested, you can go back and look at these. I've also given you exactly where that location is if you want to go look at it yourself. Sociolinguistics, then again, finishing out some of this groundwork here, is the study of language in relation to social features. I've already been talking about that just a little bit. I heard somebody ask the other day, is that Creole the same as the other Creole? And I think that's because these terms at the very bottom are not widely understood. A pidgin is essentially the first stage in a new language developing. When two languages meet each other, English has gone through exactly that, and it has gone through a period of creolization, which is the finalized version of those two languages combining with one another. That's exactly what I was explaining just a second ago. Okay, that's a lot of groundwork, but I want to make sure that I do provide that groundwork because now we're going to start to get into some other aspects of this. There's a distinction between different kinds of grammars. You probably have been exposed to prescriptive grammar your entire life. This is the rules of a language. So don't end a sentence with a preposition. Now, make sure that you don't use the word ain't. Make sure you put your commas in certain places and things of that sort. But descriptive grammar, on the other hand, is the description of the live language itself. Why do people say the things that they say? Why does language change over time? Why did these things occur? And again, that's where linguistics would take place, is in the descriptive grammar. We tend to look at what, again, people say as opposed to what they should say. And I'm putting air quotes on that because I think that there are a couple of issues with prescriptive grammar that we'll deal with as we move forward. Okay, so that brings us to something like the dictionary. The dictionary should be able to staple down language, right? The thing is, it is not a prescriptive publication, at least it shouldn't be. The dictionary itself is a descriptive volume. So what it does is it just looks at usage and then it goes about trying to codify that usage so that people who don't necessarily understand that word can go and look that word out. It's not always foolproof. If you can remember something like, actually, what was it, 15 or 20 years ago when George Bush was elected, the hanging Chad was the word of the year that year. And I constantly ask my classes, do you have any idea what a hanging Chad is? And they're all like, I have no idea. So I'd be willing to wager that unless you live through it, you might not have necessarily any idea of exactly what a hanging Chad is, but it has to do with the election. That's why it was the word of the year. And then I would say within 2 or 3 years, everybody had already forgotten it. So that's the purpose of a dictionary then. It's not a fail-all, it's not a prescriptive, it is a descriptive document. As another thing, by the way, maybe you should at some point pause and think about who edits the dictionary and what their project is. That's always an interesting question because you just assume that the dictionary is an authority without necessarily always pausing to consider who is that authority. Okay, so malarkey then is, also you can look this up in the Urban Dictionary. I do apologize, I guess I should have put a warning on this at the very start, but language is language is language. The Urban Dictionary serves the exact same function as something like the Merriam-Webster, but it does it, I would say, more on a living basis. So whereas it takes a number of years sometimes for words to enter into Merriam-Webster, the Urban Dictionary, for all the banality that it has, does tend to be the type of document that tries to keep up with slang. So if you want to know what slang means, you should not go to this kind of publication, you have to go to this one instead. Again, that illustrates the living nature of language and how we go about trying to capture it for other people. There are a couple of different accents here that I've selected. I've already talked about Irish crack. I'm just going to play this one real fast. I didn't want to embed all of these videos and have to go through like 5 different slides. And I'm actually going to jump forward to the first couple of people that they interview. I have no idea what it means.
What is the crack?
What is it? Is this going to be on the telly?
What the crack is? Yeah, I know what the crack is.
A good moment with your friends.
Sitting down with some friends, having a good meal.
It means having fun.
Being out with the family.
Having a ball.
Having a laugh.
It means being in Dublin.
And going on the tear.
So again, you get that sense of the individual nature of all these dialects and how they manifest. Okay, let me start to zero in on some of the point here. Before I do that, again, I want to be able to share this. These might be some of the words that you have in your own particular dialect. I always try to ask, and I have some people that say, I've never seen those words in my life. I have other people that will say, oh yeah, I know what a boomer is. That's the red squirrel right there. But we have, again, this utter variety here. So psychogolate, does anybody know this one? Yeah, learning to college student. Yeah, absolutely. It's a great way to be able to interact with students. Does anybody have psychoglin? I don't have it. My wife's family might have it because my understanding it's up in the mountains. I haven't directly heard it myself. Anybody? No? Do any of you have these words? No? I'm going to throw another one out there that it kind of kills me inside that this one's going away. Does anybody have Swanee in their vocabulary? Yes. Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yonder. Yeah. Yonder, by the way, is really interesting. It functions the same way as Spanish. I always forget the three in Spanish, but Kia, and then there's the third one as well. So we have here, there, and yonder is always the one that's furthest away. Yeah, and Passel. Yeah, Passel gets a lot of use as well. But Swanee is unfortunately going away with something like a mild swear word when I was growing up. So my great grandmother actually would used to say, "Why Swanee?" And that was the way that she would, you knew she was upset about something. Okay, so that gives you again the sense of Appalachian English. Oh yeah, okay, yeah. So Irish is out there as well. I haven't personally necessarily heard it myself, but it was fun to engage with. Yeah, okay, so good. I'm glad to hear that somebody out there is still using it. That actually makes me really happy. That's kind of the highlight of today because I have not heard that word in a long time. So thank you. Okay, a couple of quick characteristics of Appalachian English. The internal shift of E to A. So instead of singing, it would be sangin or rangin or flangin. We have the widening of A to A as well. That's what I was just using. The collapse of ing to just an in sound. So sangan rather than singing. Softening almost to an H or a T of the D as in words like yard. So yard, I went out to the yard. Some of you might have these in your vocabulary as well. And these might actually be things that you struggle against as you go about teaching. We all have different dialects that we use. We code switch between them. When I'm standing here, talking in public or teaching or something like that, I definitely switch my dialect. I saw a second ago, somebody said that they've helped to connect with students through the Urban Dictionary. That's a great way. I'm a video gamer. Sometimes I'll switch into video game language if I know there are gamers in my class, and I want to try to establish that connection. So it does depend, again, on the context, because that drives the type of dialect that you might use in a given circumstance. I don't want to go too much further into this, but I at least, again, want to give you that flavor of it. Appalachian English uses a lot of double negatives as well. Ain't nobody nothing, ain't nobody doing something, so forth and so on. These are just part of that particular.
We're good to go, yes.
Okay, fantastic. All right, so here we go. Okay, so I'm going to pick up where I was roughly. Again, here are a couple of other things as well that you could use that you just might want to learn. These are some of the Ocracoke dialogues of dialects, particular ways in which they approach the world, in which they talk about the world. Some of them actually we may be familiar with even in the Piedmont region as well. Dingbatter has been part of my vocabulary for a long time, but I use it as sort of an insult. The Ocracokers just use it to mean somebody who is not from that particular location. And they'll tell you, you're a dingbatter, but that's not an insult, that's just who you are. So it's what it is. Now, how do languages get passed down? Well, they're passed down from one generation to the next. Again, this is my great grandmother on the very left. She was the one who taught me the word Swanee, and then it was handed down. My own mom doesn't use it very often, but she recognizes it. I think she has about the same feeling about it that I do. Okay, so I want to talk now, and this is where we get to the controversial and challenging part. But as a language advocate, that's the entire reason that I'm here. That's the reason I wanted to be a part of the GUIDE conference. Prestige is tied into what's called geographical barriers or other socioeconomic barriers as well. From the Free Dictionary, this is oftentimes called the wrong side of the tracks, and I teach Southern culture as well. And so this is one of the ways in which I approach it. These are ideas that I share in there, and that's why I like to do this presentation. This is from an online article. It sums it up better than I could sum it up, so I've just stolen it and I've highlighted it. The standard variety of language is generally codified. It is in dictionaries. That's why I spend so much time talking about Merriam-Webster and the OED. The Urban Dictionary is kind of on the edge of that. It captures the sort of cutting edge of things. This prestigious codified variety becomes the legitimized standard. Again, that's where that comes from. This is one of the reasons why when I talk about Prescriptive grammar, I put air quotes on that because there is that sort of, let's just call it the codified version of it. This is the one that has the most prestige. Other versions, though, are not inferior to the standard, rather neither are they of less quality. They are external and non-linguistic reasons for these. Now, I just covered the Ocracokers. The reason that their dialect is so different is because they were socially isolated for a long period of time, as were the Appalachian, those in the Appalachian Mountains. They were heavily influenced by the Scots and the Irish. Those along the coast were generally influenced by the English. By the way, that is not Shakespeare's language. I hear that a lot. It's not at all. It's just an interesting dialect with an interesting accent that emerged. But again, there are historical reasons for this to occur. Now, do you know these? I should probably open the chat when I ask that. Does anybody know these? No? Okay, well, I will say, yeah, yeet. Okay, yeet's kind of my favorite right now. My son taught it to me. And I know I'm too old to use it, but I try to sneak it in whenever I can. So that's why I threw it on this slide, because I like the word yeet. I have no idea where it came from. I think that that's one of those linguistic mysteries out there. But yeah, yeet is just, it's such a fun thing, right? It just seems so random. So all of these then, shiki, someone who feels self-important, yeet is to throw, and again, so forth and so on, each of these. Where I want to go with this is, I just kind of want to, again, challenge each of you to start to consider what I'm getting at here. Let's start this way.
Yeah, hello, man. People, how y'all doing? How y'all doing, man? People, how y'all doing? Yeah, to say a few things, though. But anyway, yesterday, you see me, I was walking on the street. I was check police. The one that can mind her business. That so-called big Jew. She can't be mind her business. That nonsense, yeah, coming to me, come and tell me what? Huh? They cannot slide. I'm gonna put it on one ear, huh? She see me walking on the 18 talking to my man, and she won't kind of tell me nonsense. Oh my, y'all want it, girl. Y'all want it, girl. Because the next time she cross my path. Hello, beautiful YouTubers. Welcome back to my channel, and thank you guys so much for watching. So today, from the title, you can tell, or you can see.
Now, before I jump forward to the next video, I'm just going to briefly say that the history of Liberia is tied into that of the United States. If you're unfamiliar with it, I would encourage you to look up their flag, or just open another window right now and Google their flag. They are, again, tied directly into the history of the United States, because this was an effort on the part of the United States to resettle former African Americans who were enslaved during this particular time period. So this dialect is directly descended from that of the United States. But if somebody walked in and started talking with that heavy of an accent, using this type of slang and these types of words, the automatic reaction sometimes is, that's really broken English. And that's, again, what I want to be able to point to. Let's look at another version.
Ladies and gents, my name is Isha Manwani, and I am very delighted in standing in front of all of you all today. Of course, TEDx is the great opportunity to sharing ideas, and it is my great pleasure to be one of you all esteemed talkers today, speakers today. If you think that I'm mocking someone or there's a joke coming, there isn't. That is exactly how I used to speak 12 years ago when I was in the 9th grade.
Okay, so that gives you a variety as well. British colonization led to this form of English taking place in India. It went through a period of Pidgin and Creole as well. And so the version of English that exists there today is very different than the version of English that exists elsewhere in the entire world. Again, I want to be able to sort of jump forward here because I want to get to my point. These divisions of social class and these concepts are based on, again, a history of the entire world and a history of colonization. And so these dialects that have emerged, these different varieties that have emerged, are a direct function of that. And we have much of this in the United States as well, which is really the purpose of the presentation that I want to be able to do today. This is the particular version that I want to talk about and that I like to always advocate for, because to me, this is one of the most interesting forms of English that we have in the United States. It is a variety that's spoken by millions of people. No one is born necessarily speaking this way. It is something that is adapted, the same as all the other Englishes that we've studied to this point. And it is certainly not broken English. It does follow a logical pattern, and that's what I want to be able to share with you, so we have an idea of exactly what that pattern is. I'm running short on time, so I'm going to jump forward through this just a little bit. I'm going to actually skip this slide because I want to make sure I can manage my time right. But I want to point out a couple of features of it, something like habitual be. So there's a difference between we be jamming and we jamming, right? And by the way, the one on the right is not broken English as well. This is actually that creolization that I was talking about. There's what's called in African dialects copula deletion, which is the deletion of the helping verb in there. So they don't need, in those African dialects, those African languages, they don't need to say we are jamming, because it's implicitly understood. We jamming means that at this moment we are playing music or something like that. We be jamming doesn't mean necessarily that we're playing music right now. It means that we play music on a regular basis. So you can see that I can explain the exact same concept in normal English, air quotes on that, but it takes a lot more words. So if anything, this particular form is more efficient. He be home means he's home on a regular basis, but he's not necessarily home right now. 3 words versus a variety of words that I have to use that are going to explain the exact same concept. So that's distinct from something like he home. A couple of others, and by the way, there are tons of articles on this. Please, I'll do the same thing I do with my students. Please go fact check me on this. I deeply encourage you, because you're just going to fall down the rabbit hole and learn so much about the way that these languages work. The vocabulary is different. These are some fairly straightforward words that have actually leaked over into other forms of English as well. I know I grew up saying this as well. Give props. That was another thing that kind of my vocabulary when I was young and that I still use as well. A couple of grammatical aspects, habitual intensifier. So she stay nice means that she again, it's nice on a fairly regular basis. Collapse of verb conjunctions. They was acting crazy rather than they were acting crazy. This is an oversimplification. In those cases, it functions the exact same way as the history of the rest of the English language. And by the way, I could suggest really great videos that do a fantastic job. The one video I can think of spends about 20 or 30 minutes unpacking these things. So I don't want to overlap. And again, I want to be able to get to questions if we have them at the end. So what is the impact of this? Again, I skipped past a couple of different things, but I think that this young lady says it much better than I can.
You don't talk right. You sound funny. Why are you speaking as though you're uneducated? For many African Americans, including myself, these sentences are merely common everyday occurrences. Maybe they say cuz instead of because, or maybe they say ax instead of ask, but it's something that we've all grown up hearing. And if hip-hop is the most popular genre of music, why is this shaming of African Americans still prevalent in society? And what if I were to tell you that this was merely an innovation of the English language? Well, maybe that's true.
Okay, so I would encourage you to listen to the rest of her talk as well. It's very fascinating. Here's where I want to end though. And again, I'm trying to manage my time here. I knew I was going to cut it close. Here are my recommendations. If you started the entire thing and you were listening to Appalachian and Ocracokers and things like that, I'm like, oh, that's really interesting. Listen to all the variety of like changes, and I'm gonna have to, I would like to study that. And then you've been in a situation before where you've heard some of these other dialects, and you thought, oh, that's broken English. What is the distinction between those two things? It's the sort of challenge I like to set out when I do this presentation. If you are seeing one as like, oh, that would be interesting to study, and you're seeing the other as exactly what the young lady said just a second ago, ask yourself why, and then ask yourself how you could put them on the exact same level. Stop thinking like a prescriptivist in terms of, I need to get people to speak properly, and start thinking in terms of a descriptivist. Just starting a conversation of these can be really wonderful. Why did you say that? I'm actually interested. What does that word mean? What is this construction? Where did you learn that construction? these are pieces of those individuals' identities. And I'm talking about everyone, Appalachian, AAVE, the Ocracoke, so forth and so on. Striking up those conversations allows you to connect with your students and connect with other individuals because, again, you're talking about their sense of identity and their sense of place. This is how we talk when we're at home. And that's why it matters, is because, again, we have this prestige built into these different dialects. By being more aware of those varieties of prestige, we can account for that and we can understand that prescriptivism, I should say, tends to be a facet of the dominant version of English rather than an actual failure or something on the part of the other different dialects that are out there. And I'm not advocating for everybody to just have a Wild West where we have all the different rules and things like that. We do have to have certain parameters for being able to communicate with other people, but we need to be aware of what code switching is, which is, again, that ability that I mentioned earlier to switch between different dialects at different moments, and to be able to, above all else, honor those different dialects and to be able to celebrate them because they are a sense of identity for these individuals. That gives me 2 minutes. Okay, I was trying to go through it. I have to skip the line story, but it is tied to a YouTube video as well. If you're interested, you could pull up the slides and go directly to the video. But I want to be able to back out of this. Do you have any questions or comments? I always welcome these. Goal is to try to challenge people and challenge your assumptions and challenge the way that you understand and view language. So again, people get heated about language sometimes. Nothing? You guys hearing?
No, I don't have a question, but I do have an experience. I remember saying, you favor so-and-so, some celebrity. And they said, what does that mean? And in my family, we say when you favor someone, you resemble someone. They had no idea what I was talking about. So that was something that was new for me when I moved to this area.
Oh, okay. Yeah, absolutely. That's okay. Now you taught me something because I had no idea that that was different in other locations. I've been using that construction my whole life.
I have too. And it's all within North Carolina. So I grew up in Eastern North Carolina. I moved over here to the Charlotte area, and apparently that was totally different when I said favor.
Yeah. So I imagine that you have some of these other constructions in your dialect. Actually, the most interesting, I think, is route and route. You probably say route, right?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, and then route is more of the mountains, and then the Piedmont, it meets in the middle. And again, that's based on the English settling the coast, and then the Scots-Irish settling the mountains, and then meeting right here in the Piedmont. So, yeah. Anybody? Okay, all right. You never tell when there are no questions if that means everybody's just like stewing, or if you guys are like, okay, what's my next session? Or I don't know what that means. So, yeah, I mean, it could be that as well. It could be, yeah, definitely that as well. All right, if you guys have no questions or comments or anything, if you're interested in the slides, please shoot me an email. I'll be happy to share them. I hope you can see I'm very passionate about this topic. I like to share these ideas and to try to challenge people's assumptions about the world around them and the use of language and how they perceive other language groups and dialects. So I hope you have a great Friday and a great weekend.
Thank you so much, John. We appreciate you sharing your very informative presentation and very interesting as well. Thank you, participants. I appreciate you being very patient with us and understanding with the chaos of logging back in. So we thank you for joining us again. If you want to, you could continue in the conference by logging into one of our concurrent sessions starting at 11 o'clock. I hope you all have a wonderful day.
Thank you.